All right, so I'm Jason Kramer, and I'm interviewing my site supervisor, Brian.
Hi
And
there.
so we're having questions about leadership, and we're going to start with number one.
So, can you name a person who has a tremendous impact on you as a leader? Maybe someone who has been a mentor to you. Why and how did this person impact your life? Um, I would say, like, with my position right now where I'm at professionally, probably the person who's impacted that the most was a former past assistant principal that we had here, who's moved on to moved into a principalship in other places. But I kind of learned from just watching his style, and we had similarities, so it was an easy kind of mentor-mentee ship,
Mm-hmm.
just as a natural piece there. Things he did well, I always felt, was he listened through things. He wasn't very quick to make movements before getting information. I always felt like he had a lot of respect for the people he was working with and for and all, and you could feel that, so then you could move forward with things. Um, and I always felt like as a leader he had an open door that I felt comfortable I could sit down and talk with him and toss things around and all. I also go back to, I think my parents have also demonstrated or shown things like that, and I look at me as just a person. When I was growing up and playing sports and all that I did, I it was either natural or it just happened, but I would find myself like I was a captain of the wrestling team for a couple years, even though I wasn't a good wrestler.
Yeah.
And it was more just because I had natural qualities of dependability, of kind of leading by example, of moving through things, and really sports have shaped a lot of like who I am. So like that was in wrestling. I did lacrosse, and I was a captain of the lacrosse squad for probably 2 or 3 years or something, and that was just because of the dependability of my athletic ability, but also of that I just kind of stepped into those roles naturally. And I think that's kind of continued, that whenever I'm in places, I have a natural intuition to do more than what's like the set standard. And I think that's what leadership is people that don't really ask what they're getting back, they just move things forward.
So just going above and beyond what you're asked to
It
do.
is one of those things of, going above and beyond what's just being asked to do. And I think some people have the insight to see where things are needed and to make things go, and some people are more content. They're more content to just kind of be as is. Like, well, this is what my job is. I'm just going to do it, and I'm okay with that. So, I think my parents really were just like that. Like my mom's like that. My dad was always in kind of leadership roles or doing different things, and that was just kind of that was just modeled for me. So.
Exactly. So you had a set of standards growing up of achieving the A, then just going for the average C kind of thing in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it wasn't always tied to just grades. I mean, my dad struggled through schools and stuff with a learning disability that probably wasn't diagnosed, and I have one of those, and I think that just that it was just really making sure that you personally are doing the best job that you can, and then good outcomes come from that.
That's a good answer.
I see this one as neat. How do you encourage creative thinking within your organization? That's like number 4. And one thing I think about that is, and I second guess and think about that myself all the time, and it's because I've been in this position the longest out of our department.
Yeah.
And one thing when we're trying to creatively think about new solutions to old problems, I really try hard not to be that old guard of, oh, we did that before, oh, we've tried that. Kind of really try to wear the hat of not squashing any kind of thoughts and ideas, and really taking each school year, each semester, each thing as new. And even though we tried something in the past, if it didn't work, we could try it again, because it could be a good answer to a solution. It could have been that the things just weren't in alignment to work.
So it just depends on the student, how the function of the classroom is going.
Yeah, or even like classes on a whole, like, in a management position that I have that you don't see a ton of is like I have to go to like leadership and management team meetings, and in there there's a lot of times where things can just get squashed of, oh, we did that a few years ago and it didn't work and it'll never work. And thoughts like that can just totally squash creative thinking to like, yeah, there's some innovation and there's some new things, but there's also in education a lot of recycling of like, you talk to older teachers and it's like things that are coming up now are things that we went through 20 years ago, that they like the cycle kind of just keeps cycling around with some new twists and things on it. And I think being an optimist and being somebody who's like, okay, how can we continue to make things better and move forward, allows for creative thinking in an organization.
Great.
I get stimulated when you look at like, in the for-profit land, when you talk to companies that are like, don't tell me what we can't do, tell me what we can do. Always think about like, what if there weren't barriers? What if you could just throw whatever you needed to throw at a situation to come up with a problem? And it's hard to do that in public schools, but you can still try to live a little bit in that utopia of like, what if we had more resources? What if we had something else we could throw at problems and foster betterness? So
it's not exactly what you have and what you can work with, but it's also like thinking like, what could we expand on? What services we can provide for students? What could we incorporate?
And just I think having an openness and a willingness to listen is really so huge.
Yeah.
Especially in leadership roles, it allows people that you are supposed to be leading. It allows them to feel listened to. It allows them to feel like they have power. It allows them to feel like they're valuable. And all those qualities, people work harder when they feel valued, when they feel listened to, when they feel respected, when they feel like they're a person. I've been in a few jobs where like things like that get squashed, and you're like, what am I doing here? What's my like, why? But like I've been in other jobs where like my superior has, allowed me to do things with a little bit of leeway and see where it works out. Respected me and listened to me and met me where I was, and those kind of things. Those little things are so important to foster people that you work with to do more and develop more.
Exactly. I agree. So what other question you want to talk about? About how do you or other leaders in your organization communicate the core values? That's number 7.
That's a great question. I mean, that's something hard, and I kind of wonder how well we're doing that right now. We have all different levels of that, where we have, one way that would be communicated would be like at a whole staff level or a whole district level. Those core values are embedded in a public school system as what are your district goals, what are your building goals. So those are like your school improvement plans, your district improvement plans.
Like
what do they look? Yeah, because that is your core values in a way. Like you're identifying who you're serving, what you want to do better, and then how do you want to improve on that. And that's embedded in a school improvement plan. When I trickle it all the way down to like a learning center, a special ed room, we've had department meetings, and we haven't for a while. Well, we have them every year, but some years ago when I started here and we did this, we sat down as a department and we did exercises like this. And actually, we kind of had that the leader that I started with talking about. We had him kind of work with us as a department to work through and do a department meeting like that for a whole day, where it was like, what's your mission statement? the students you work with, where do you want to see them at the end of high school? So where are they coming in? And those were core values. Like you want all your students reading at a certain, are we still going? We went to sleep. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
But the green light was on still. We're good. We're here. Listen in. It's good stuff. You know, we did like, where do you want the students you work with at the end of 4 years?
Yeah.
So what do you want them to have? What do you want them to be achieving? What's like, if you took your whole special ed population, where would you want them? You want them all reading at a certain grade level. You want them all writing at a certain grade level. You want them all to maybe have a resume and have an awareness on how to do something like that. When we did that stuff, we talked about like we want our students to be involved in their IEP meeting and facilitate their IEP meeting by the time they're seniors. And as our department, we've lost some people, we've picked up some people. These things, I myself have kind of juggled this stuff in my head as being the department leader of like, should we take a department day and go back and revisit stuff we did 8 years ago and say, hey, where are we at with this? This is new to some folks because you weren't here when we did it. Some folks are back and looking at it like me, like we'd look at it a second time and say, as a department, what do we agree with here? And the culture of schools changed. I mean, we've had a radical change in the past year or two around like this development of the essential skills and what students need to graduate, and then we're rolling into that Common Core state standards that people talk about, and we're rolling into the Smarter Balance assessment. And so, you know, last year we were at the end of the year, it was kind of, I was starting to see this gap in our department, and I think we're kind of due this year. So I guess that's one of my pieces of like, you know, when you go to this, like what does good things? I think good leaders can step back from what they're involved in and try to think clearly, okay, where are we at and where are the people that I'm at with? Mm-hmm. And how do we make sure we're all communicating the same language? We share common core values. We express those, we understand them, and we want to drive towards them.
So you're always going back to like your, you know, recent plans and then going back to it and then developing based on that?
I think so, yeah, because that's your starting block, and you're saying, like, do you agree with what we said there? Are we still in the same spot? And if you are, then you're like, okay, that's some good core values and good, like, mission statement, move forward. And if times have changed and those things haven't changed, maybe you need to kind of, you know, go through a process to reevaluate them and look at them again, and then and see what changes and what develops new.
Can I have this?
That's great. Do you want to do another question? Let's see.
Well, I would say also that touches on like that last one. What do you do to ensure you continue to grow and develop as a leader? And I think that's a personal thing of like, how do you as a person slow down and reflect? And then what you're reflecting about is that you're not stagnant. Like you're not doing things the same way you've been. Like I always get worried about myself of like if I hit a point of, well, this is how we've always done it, and you're more into a rhythm of like this is what's easy, so I'm just going to do it that way. So I mean, that's me personally as a teacher. Like I can't continue to just teach the same thing from last year, just saying like, well, last year must have been perfect, so I'm just going to do it again. Like, I think you have to be honest with yourself that nothing's ever done perfectly and nothing's ever done exactly how you want it. So sometimes you got to slow down and assess it and say what could be better. And it's I see it as I see it as how do you continue to develop as a good leader. You have to be willing to reflect and be critical of yourself, which is tough. I think people want to say, you want to give yourself a pat on the back and say, oh, it's great, I'm just going to keep doing it. But like
sometimes you gotta say, like, what am I doing wrong? What can I improve on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you nailed it.
Great. What advice would you give somebody going into a leadership position for the first time? That's number 19.
You know, what I would do in that is I would... Sometimes leadership positions are a little open-ended and you're not really sure what is and what you're supposed to be. So, like, trying to really assess and establish what your responsibilities and what your roles are is good. I also think in leadership positions is don't don't like just infer or just assume that people know what is and what isn't. I think there's some value in, like, if you're leading people when you first start off, is saying, hey, this is what I perceive my position as. What do you? So you really have open communication of what people can expect from somebody. Because you're leading them and you want to be able to be like, you could expect me to do these things, but this is something that I need you to do on your own. And listening, I think listening is such a huge part of leadership. And I know, like, that's something I've had to develop more of. I'm not a great person in that regards. I think listening and reflecting, where you kind of slow down and you really process through things.
And process what other people are thinking and how they're responding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
And figuring out ways to address hard conversations when you're leading with people, because sometimes you're going to have, like, things that aren't being done right, and I guess in some standpoint you have to kind of sit down and talk about, like, what could be done better. And that's a hard conversation. And so how do you address that in a respectful, productive manner that people don't just feel belittled, but they feel like, hey, this is what I do well, and this is what I could get better at.
That's great. Good answer.
Brian's really good at that too.
Let's see. What is the biggest challenge facing leaders today?
I honestly would say in the public school, I think one of the biggest challenges of leadership roles is time. Time and energy is our job, through the nature of the beast in the past years, has gotten more and more and more and more, and we've lost we've lost staffing, we've lost funding, we've lost time in our day just because of changing schedules and things. And so I think one of the hardest positions is trying to figure out how to, like, balance what it is you really have to do, and how can you be engaged and satisfied that you're doing, like, one of the hardest job pieces of the job right now is balance. Like, it's impossible to do everything.
Yeah.
So what do you have to get done professionally to, like, maintain your job, and what more can you do without burning yourself out? Yeah. And it's hard. I find myself constantly having to walk this line of protecting myself as a professional, because if I were to just continue being like, yes, 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 I would not be able to do what I need to do. And then I would fall apart in the other parts of my life. I wouldn't be a good husband or a good father or a good person in the community and those things. And that would hurt. So trying to juggle and balance it out in our kind of rapidly expanding lives where we just do everything faster, faster, more, more, more. And that's hard.
Yeah, so it's really hard to just be more productive and building on everything and keeping it consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And keeping your sanity of, like, where you're at, of realizing, like, if I do this, I might only have a few years in me. And if I want longevity, how do I make sure it's a marathon? How do I make sure I can run each mile and not just sprint and then collapse in, like, year 10?
That's a good metaphor.
So, yeah. You want to do one more? Where we at?
I'm not sure. How many questions have we gone through? We've done 19, 20,
kind of knocked out 1 and 2 up there.
Yeah, 1, 2, most important decisions. Do you just want to do about 2 more? Really quick ones?
Yeah.
So we got 1, 2.
We did
4.
What is the challenges? One mistake you witness leaders making more frequently than others? I don't know. One behavior or trait that you've seen.
Let's do one more since we're at 20 minutes right now.
You know, this is an interesting one to me. What are the few resources you would recommend for someone looking to gain insight? You know, I think it depends on where you're at as a leader, but I always recommend, I think there's really great, like, biographies and books out there that I go back to, like, the sports. So what's really developed and helped me are seeking out and looking into coaching books.
Mm-hmm.
Because in there, I mean, that's what coaches are. Coaches are motivators and leaders, and they do a whole organizational piece to it. But you can have, and you can see it in the NBA right now, you can have the most talented team out there, but if they don't move the ball around and they don't respect each other and all, then they're going to go 0-10.
Yeah, kind of like the Miami Heat or the...
What's that?
Like the Miami Heat or New Jersey Nets. And
like those two, and isn't it where the Spurs are right now? With
the Cavaliers,
too. So there's that piece, and then I kind of step back to like, okay, so I gravitate towards that, so I'll pick up like just coaching books, like biographies of like what did these people do well, and it's in there when you kind of sit down and you kind of see their personalities, their natural instincts and intuitions, but then also a craft and a skill that they developed. How to make sure everybody on the team is as important as your like stud star player, because it's a team and you need all your depth and all. I think you can then go into the business world and pick up books about like business leaders that have been so dynamic, and you'll see the parallels. You'll see the same things happening. Is they just didn't take their like team of CEOs and say, you guys are it. But those really good leaders, they went into the buildings and they made open door policies. They put the lead worker in a room with all the people that they're leading. It wasn't like management's down here with a closed door and over here are all the workers.
So you're saying that management is always with the, you call it, I don't say the understaffed, but who are
your workers or your team.
exactly.
Usually you have a team leader and a team, and you see some really productive businesses that don't have a defined black and white line there. I mean, there's a chain of command, and you kind of roll through that. But in that same thing, there's a lot of like autonomy and respect for everybody, where we're all infused together. And that allows for people to ask quick questions, to clarify things, and to do things kind of better and cleaner, and do it right the first time, so you're not backtracking so much. And I think those are like good pieces to leadership.
Well, thank you, Brian, for this interview.
Yeah, man. Of course.